Hi everyone, welcome back to Up in the Air. I'm Ryan Breton.
And I'm JP Nicola. Nice to be with you.
We have a lot to discuss tonight, ranging from the recent cold weather here in the Northeast to the details on the impact weather satellites have on weather forecasting.
Plus, students from our climate dynamics class here in the Department of Meteorology will be by with details on emissions, aerosols, and their impacts on our world's climate.
Before we get started, we do want to mention why we look a little bit differently this week.
Ryan and I both shaved our heads last Monday as a part of No Hair, Don't Care, a fundraiser for the Penn State Dance Marathon.
That's right. With all the cold weather recently, it's been very cold without a head of hair.
No doubt about it. We wish everyone a fantastic Thon weekend.
For sure, and we hope to see you there. But first, it's time for Update in the Air.
Southeast Brazil is in the midst of its worst drought in nearly a century, and its largest city, Sao Paulo, is facing serious concerns regarding their reservoir systems. The largest system is near depletion, which has caused many residents to endure sporadic cutoffs lasting days. Officials say that such rationing may be needed with water service provided only 2 days a week. The origins of this crisis go beyond the recent drought to include the city's surging population, a chronically leaky system that spills vast amounts of water before it reaches homes, the pollution of the city's rivers, and the destruction of many forests and wetlands that release water into the reservoirs. The decrease in relative humidity as a result of deforestation has diminished rainfall in southeast Brazil. The governor of Sao Paulo state points at climate change in stating, "When it rains too much, and when there's drought, it's way too dry." Brazil is highly dependent on hydropower plants for its energy, so decreasing water levels raises the risk of power blackouts.
There is some concern in the field that forecast accuracy could be impacted by aging weather satellites. The weather satellite SNPP, launched in 2011, circles Earth about 14 times per day. It is a polar orbiting satellite, meaning it captures higher resolution images and data. It passes over the United States during full daylight hours, according to NOAA. As it does so, it gathers data, which is then converted to estimates of temperature and other weather variables that are fed into our computer models. This satellite is getting old, however, and is expected to reach the end of its lifespan next year, according to the Government Accountability Office. The problem is that a replacement satellite is not expected to launch until March of 2017. If this satellite were to go down without a replacement at the ready, there would be a substantial drop in data available for models to enter into the complex equations they crunch to determine how weather patterns evolve worldwide. The Weather Service has performed case studies, running models and developing forecasts without data from this satellite, and has determined there would be less predictability of complex weather patterns. While any gap in coverage would only be for a few months, weather is always occurring, and the need for good data in our models is of the utmost importance.
The chance for a mega drought in the southwestern United States for more than 30 years has increased to 50%, with the odds of a 10-year drought affecting the same region having increased to 80%. This new study by Cornell University, the University of Arizona, and the U.S. Geological Survey say the current drought is a preview of what will happen in the future in climate change. Researchers determined through the use of climate models that lengthy droughts would hit New Mexico and Arizona, as well as California. This does not bode well for California, as the extent of the current drought already has 58% of the state experiencing exceptional drought conditions. Researchers say that these findings are important for governments to consider as they develop strategies to cope with such effects of climate change in densely populated areas where prolonged droughts would pose extreme challenges to water resources. New research has linked warmer seas to hurricane outbreaks in the Atlantic during previous centuries. This might seem unsurprising, but it's concerning because similar sea surface warming is again occurring as greenhouse gas pollution heats up the globe. The group of researchers, led by Jeffrey Donnelly of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, examined 2,000 years' worth of storm-thrown sand washed from the ocean into a Massachusetts salt pond, as it settled between layers of mud. Cores of sediment were examined and storm dates were determined by matching key markers in the core samples with known events in history. 2 peaks in hurricane activity were gleaned from the examination of sediment cores, peaks much greater in activity than what has been seen over the last couple hundred years. Both cases show an association with warmer sea surface temperatures and were at a time before humans began warming the planet. They say their findings have implications for a warming planet and could foreshadow historically unprecedented strings of storms of Category 3 or 4 intensity, Donnelly explains, in the Atlantic Basin's climate-changed future.
The head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction believes that more effort is needed to reduce the risk extreme weather poses in every area, from human health to infrastructure. Economic losses from natural disasters are rising worldwide, according to the UN. Poorer nations are at the forefront. They must prioritize disaster risk in plans for areas such as health and education, according to researchers advising the UN's disaster risk experts. In 2014, losses due to weather dropped worldwide, partially due to a quiet North Atlantic hurricane season. However, it is important to prepare regardless of the current weather. As we've seen recently in Boston, the weather pattern can turn on a dime. And that's Update in the Air for this week. We'll be back in a moment with more. Welcome back to Up in the Air.
A number of emissions and atmospheric processes affect our Earth's climate system. It's time to hear about this from students in Meteorology 470, our climate dynamics class.
That's right, Lexi Hurt, Samantha Ballard, and our own Meredith Fish are here now with more.
Each of the world's countries contributes various amounts of both gas and particle emissions to the atmosphere, influencing changes in weather and climate on a daily basis. The United States is the second highest emitter in the world. Atmospheric concentrations of aerosols and greenhouse gases have risen considerably since the Industrial Revolution. Carbon dioxide is the primary greenhouse gas emitted. The combustion of fossil fuels such as coal, natural gas, and oil for electricity, transportation, and industry is the predominant human activity that emits CO2. CO2 is constantly being exchanged among the atmosphere, ocean, and land surface. With a climbing population and an expanding economy, the U.S. settlement area is broadening, and as it does, Americans are driving more, consuming more energy, and emitting more carbon. Because of its slow removal processes, atmospheric CO2 will continue to increase in the long term, even if its emission is substantially reduced from present levels. This allows the atmosphere-ocean gas transfer to continue for many years to come. It is important to note that the ocean-atmosphere exchange of additional greenhouse gases such as methane and nitrous oxide and trace gases such as aerosols contribute to the changing oceanic processes as well.
Methane is found in our ocean sediment hydrates and is trapped in the deep ocean by high pressures. A more immediate issue is that methane is found in the Arctic trapped in the frozen tundra. If these frozen structures melt, methane can be released in the atmosphere, increasing the predicted greenhouse effect. Marine anthropogenic nitrous oxide emissions come from atmospheric anthropogenic nitrogen deposition in the ocean. The formation of nitrous oxide happens below the surface in well-oxygenated environments. The Global Ocean Biochemistry Model is an example of a way to quantify anthropogenic nitrous oxide. The ocean is also a major source of aerosols. The ocean atmospheric exchange of particulate matter influences the global budget of carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur aerosols, which are produced by phytoplankton. Air bubbles at the sea surface transfer ocean water and sea salt into the atmosphere. The ocean water evaporates and the salt is left in the atmosphere. It is estimated that around 20 to 35% of anthropogenic carbon dioxide sequesters in the ocean. Anthropogenic carbon makes up a small percentage of an unknown amount of the natural chemical component of the ocean, dissolved in organic carbon.
Climate models have been trying to understand how this rise in CO2 will be influencing the climate, including its impacts on the oceans. Impacts that are expected include sea level rise and increased storm surge. Within the 20th century, ocean thermal expansion and glacier melting have been the largest contributors to global mean sea level rise, contributing to 75% of the observed rise. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, the loss from glaciers and ice sheets, as well as increases in ocean warming, it is very likely that the rate of global mean sea level rise will surpass the rate observed during 1971 to 2010. As sea level rise is more of a regional issue, some places are expected to experience significant deviations on the local and regional scale, including Venice, Copenhagen, and Florida. Increasing sea level rise will lead to more coastal flooding and increase the related impacts. Hurricane Sandy was an example of this, as the destruction from that hurricane was mainly attributed to storm surge, something that could amplify if sea levels continue to rise throughout the coming decades. More frequent and intense storms, as well as subsidence, are also projected to increase coastal flooding on top of sea level rise. In the coming years, it will be the combined effort of mitigation and protection to effectively manage coastal flooding. Every person, ecosystem, and animal will be affected in some way or another, whether it's sea level rise, storm surge, or another impact. Understanding the potential destruction rising emissions has is crucial for finding ways to combat these consequences in the future.
For Up in the Air, this is Lexi Hurt,
Samantha Ballard,
And Meredith Fish.
It's been an incredibly cold February around much of the Northeast.
Yeah, that's right, JP. The worst of the cold has been to our north. In Boston, every day so far this month has had below average temperatures.
And as we've talked about, there's been plenty of snow too.
Hunter Williams is here now with our climate outlook to see if there's any more cold in our future.
Thank you, JP and Ryan. Now, if you live anywhere here along the East Coast, you don't need me to stand up here and tell you that it's been pretty cold over the past couple of days. And as we take a look at the snowfall map here, you'll see quite a bit of snow to go around. In fact, 38% of the country covered in snow. And as we get into parts of late February, that's a pretty large amount here, including parts of the deep south that aren't quite used to the wintry weather, but plenty of wintry weather here once again through parts of the Northeast, north of Boston, stretching through upstate New York, seeing these very high snow depth values, upwards of 2 feet in some areas. So people just can't seem to get a break from the snow here, especially across parts of the Northeast. And as we go through the next week, unfortunately, the cold weather does look to continue, as you see plenty of cold air dipping back down across the Northeast here as we go throughout next week. And that's reflected as we move to the temperature outlook. As you can see, just about everybody in the East seeing these below normal temperatures. Now, the focus of these below normal temperatures will be through parts of the Midwest, Cleveland to Chicago, up towards Minneapolis. Seeing these well below normal temperatures, but I don't want to just single out those cities, as we're seeing plenty of cold air to go around, including through parts of the Southeast. And as we push out west, a bit of a continuation of this trend through parts of New Mexico, up through Colorado, northern Utah, Idaho, Oregon, and into Washington, seeing these slightly below normal temperatures here as we go through the next 8 to 14 days. But as we take a look towards southern and central California, slightly above average. So once again, these drought-stricken areas just can't seem to get a break, at least as far as the heat goes, through the next 8 to 14 days. But as we shift our focus to the precipitation outlook, these same areas seeing the colder weather, also seeing above average precipitation values here across the East Coast. So you know what that means. We could see a little bit more snowy weather as we go through the next week or so here. But we will focus on this area of slightly above normal precipitation values here through parts of the Gulf Coast, Georgia, Alabama, towards Mississippi and Louisiana here, getting in on these above average precipitation values as well, but below normal through parts of the Great Lakes areas and through the Midwest, once again, slightly below normal for those places. But as we push out west, the same swath of states that we're seeing the slightly cooler temperatures, also seeing the slightly above normal precipitation values. But as we focus on parts of southern and central California, no shading here. Now, where we'd certainly like to see the green shading here to indicate some more rain, we'll certainly take not adding to that deficit as we go through the next 8 to 14 days. Once again, I'm student meteorologist Hunter Williams. Back to JP and Ryan.
Thanks, Hunter, and thank you for joining us this week.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode, filled with plenty of content from students here at Penn State.
I'm JP Nicola.
And I'm Ryan Breton. Best of luck to all the dancers, including a few meteorology students in Thon 2015. We'll see you next week up in the air.